Hey guys, and welcome to a new video. Today is the fourth balance manifesto, I think. I think the first one was like jewels, ailments, then we had arch nemesis, we had the altars, and now we're at curses. So I think this is even the last balance manifesto. I'm not 100% sure, but let's take a look. They're gonna change curses, and let's find out what they want to do to it. Our last three manifestos cover jewels. Okay, I just mentioned that. Okay, so good. What do we have? For more details, see below. Hex strength against different monster tiers. Currently, Hex builds are at their weakest against monsters where they matter the most, and at their strongest where they matter the least. This is pretty partly because Hexes have hidden penalties which reduce their effectiveness when fighting unique monsters and pinnacle bosses, currently 33% and 66% respectively. Yeah, this is a common thing that monsters and bosses and pinnacle bosses and uber pinnacle bosses, they are like very resistant to curses overall. It is normal for these monsters to have various hidden penalties, as nothing, every single one would create a lot of clutter in their mod descriptions. Players can reasonably expect these monsters to be more difficult to fight, so in general, showing the entire list of penalties is not very necessary. However, the penalty against hexes is on outlier because it's much more significant compared to other hidden penalties. Because it is substantial while also being hidden from players, it is unlikely to be compensated for during build creation and creates notable disadvantage for hex build. Yeah, I mean this is a clear thing, right? You have like your character and you want to make it stronger, and there is different ways of making your character stronger. It's either getting more power level to your character or debuffing the enemy, which, if we draw a line, is still the same. You know, if you have like 100k damage and the monster takes like 100% increased damage, for example, it is also DPS increase, even though it's not on your side, but the monster just takes increased damage. It's the ways like curses work, or exposure, and all these kind of things, like a bottled faith. You know, monster consecrated ground take 10% increased damage. It doesn't affect your actual damage. You still have the same output, but the monster just takes increased damage, which is still a DPS gain. And it's just hex builds with a doom mechanic that are using that. For example, a hex blast. The more doom, the more damage, the more modifiers, and so on. We have removed both of these penalties so that hexes will be consistently effective against all monsters in the game. Okay. That is like a big chunk of damage increase for all builds that are using, like, yeah, I mean, almost every build uses curses. Like, what is your, even if you play any kind of Ellie build, you know, you want to have, like, conductivity, you want to have Ellie weakness, you want to have flammability for my ignite builds, vulnerability for bleed builds. Like, curses are always in the builds, but it's not always, like, the highest priority, basically, right? But if you want to get a better character, you're going to add those eventually. The Doom mechanic. Another issue that we feel undermines hex builds is the Doom mechanic. We designed Doom with the goal of making self-cast hexes more effective than other, more trivial applications of hexes, such as the Blasphemy and Hex Touch support. Doom mechanic was somewhat successful in its goal, but came at the cost of adding a lot of complexity to hex-related mechanics. We're removing the Doom mechanic, and as a consequence, we'll be making several other changes to the mechanics that previously interact with Doom. For example, all stats that reference Doom have been replaced with other curse-themed stats. Hexblast has had its skill mechanics and damage adjusted to account for these loss of Doom scaling. Impending Doom has also had its base damage roughly doubled to compensate for this loss. We have replaced the Doomsday Keystone and a new Hex-themed Keystone. Curse-related uniques. We've buffed a bunch of Hex-related unique items and have reworked items, unique items that previously integrated with Doom, such as the Faded and Unique Ring. We also added some more powerful unique items that interact with Hexes. So here I actually want to like pull up a Path of Exile real quick. Here on the alpha version, which is basically where I have like my level 50 whatever Wave of Conviction Knight character, just to like show you guys what that actually means when it comes to Doom. So Doom, I mean, it's weird to talk about it since it gets removed, but just as a point of understanding, curses have a certain effectiveness, and the longer the curse is on target, the stronger they get. And this is basically Doom. For example, my flammability, if I find it, Cold Snap, flammability. It says curse gains 10 Doom per second if you cast the spell yourself, okay? And I think the base Doom, I think is 30, that can be increased with like skill points where it adds to maximum Doom. So basically what we're gonna do here, just to show that, we have here a monster, right? And I curse it now, or those two, right? So they are cursed now, and you're gonna see that the icon is gonna change. At some point, it's gonna start pulsating. as you see over here, right? So if I do this on this guy doesn't have pulsating. It takes a couple of seconds, and at some point, boom, now it's actually pulsating. That shows me that the maximum doom has been reached, and the maximum effect of my curses are actually applicative now. And that is a problem if you have like a lot of doom. Let's say you have like a 60 maximum doom with your skill tree, with alternate quality gems, with all these kind of sources, and if it's still 10 doom per second, hey, it takes like 5 to 6 seconds to get your maximum doom. So you cast and you wait. Okay, a couple seconds later, now I can press Hex Blast and I will do fucking big ton damage, right? That's why Doomsday came in, because after 1 second you had the maximum of doom, but the curse didn't do anything in that second, basically, right? So instead, you put this down, after 1 second, boom, it explodes, having maximum doom on all targets, put on your Hex Blast, and you're gonna have big damage. So that's actually interesting that they are completely removing that, because if you have like a curse of flammability on hit ring, for example, I don't think that this actually has any form of doom. And I think blasphemy as well. So it really needs to be hand casted. But it still works if you have blasphemy and despair and you're running Hex Blast. Monsters will have the curse on it, so it can get soaked up by Hex Blast. You will trigger the explosion of it, but you're not gonna get any extra damage because it is a blasphemy, it's a curse on hit, it's whatever. This doesn't trigger doom, only hand cast. So we have Anathema, the Moonstone Ring, that has 16% chance to gain a power charge when you cast a curse spell. Curse limit is equal to your maximum power charges. You know where I see the problem here? There is so few ways of adding curses to your build if it's not handcast. Like, for example, my EK Ignite, right? What do we have? We have a flammability on hit ring. So that means that you can get curses through your rings, and you can get curses on your, I think on the gloves, right? There's a lot of gloves that give you like a curse. But if I would say, I have different gloves, so I cannot get a curse on my gloves because I need them to be Searing Exarch and Eater of Worlds and stuff like that. But I have one flammability hit on ring. If I would need another curse where I would say, okay, the next best thing would be Ally Weakness, you know, because it's great synergy with the flammability to even lower the resistance even further. I don't know how to put any other form of like curse on hit in my build without like adding or changing entire slots. So I don't think it's about the curse limit that is bad. It's just about adding more and more curses to your build that you can effectively use, because you don't want to like have an entire rotation while trying to get 5 hexes off, right? And in the end of the day, like Occultist gets like 1 additional curse. You have like what is it here? The Whispers of Doom. 3 golden oil. Any build can have a maximum of 2 curse limits if you're able to get a second curse on your build, but this is usually a stage where it already fails. So I don't know, sounds terrible in my opinion. This new ring lets you scale your curse limit in a completely different way by tying it to your power charge count, or you can simply scale it and put it apply 3 curses. Put this on to apply 3 curses. Why? Chance to gain a power charge when you cast a curse. Oh, you generate power. Yeah, but other ways of applying that. Heretic's Veil. It would be nice to know what the previous versions would be. Hyper level 22 blasphemy. So the curse have increased reservation efficiency. Has there been any changes? Here's an example of one of the rebalanced curse uniques. The reservation efficiency mod has been buffed from 20 to 30%, and the level of Sacred Gems from 1 to 2. So yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, nothing here sounds interesting, like different. Okay, but if it's like, hey, it's now 30% increased reservation, like whatever, you know, like they really need to like redesign uniques to make it cool, not just, hey, instead of +1 you get now +2. So that's like pretty big, right? Ensuring self-cast is powerful. In most cases, systems that facilitate somewhat automated gameplay, like Hexage applying hexes automatically, should either come at a much higher cost or be less effective. In some cases, both are needed to counterbalance the significant upside and automation. Otherwise, the option to automate will always be the obvious choice and eclipse other more interactive gameplay styles. The Doom mechanic was aimed at fulfilling this function for hexes and is being replaced by alternatives, simpler solutions. Yeah, that's what I'm just saying, right? Nobody wants to sit here and have like QWERT, like 5 curses, like, okay, I'm at the boss, flammability, Ally Weakness, Temporal Chains, Despair. Like, who is doing that? Dude, until I'm able to apply my actual damage on, after debuffing the enemy, the first curse will already fall off. Like, obviously people want to have like a curse on hit ring, so they just simply forget about it. What we like is a one-button playstyle. I want to press my EK, I want to press my Tornado Shot, I want to press whatever ability I feel comfortable with, and I want to do big, dick damage. Then I have like a movement skill, maybe a supplemental totem or Arcanist brand, and that's it. I have my dude, I'm speeding here. I have my 3 buttons. This is not an MMO. I don't need like in World of Warcraft, I need like a 10-button core rotation to actually deal damage, right? I think, yeah, we have added penalties to both Blasphemy and Hextouch supports, which grant less curse effect at all gem levels. Additionally, item mods that inflict a specific hex no longer do so with increased effect. This includes items where the hex is meant to be a downside on the player, such as Coward's Chain, Coward's Legacy, and Soul Mantle. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing. Remember, in the old PoE, I mean, there's always like weird to say when was that, right? But if I just pull up my EK Ignite just because it's my favorite build of all time and it's so fucking good. But yeah, it used to be curse enemies with level 8 Assassin's Mark, curse enemies with level 10 or level 12 Assassin's Mark. At some point they got away from this like level, and now it's like, yo, here take curse enemies with flammability on hit with a 20% increased effect, or even like 48% increased effect. On the gloves. The way I think it works, which I'm not entirely sure, but if we say flammability, right? Flammability PoE. What I think is like, okay, you have a level 1 curse, which is increased by a certain amount of effect, so it would be somewhere around a level 8, level 10, something at this stage. So I think the power level didn't change, it's just like the wording or maybe like better code or whatever that's gonna be, right? And removing that, yes, it will reduce your damage, but it's also like, it is free damage. So even if they nerf that by a tiny bit, but there's other builds, for example, like the Occultist Explosion, for example, right? There is only like cursed enemies you are a mini kill explode. I think on Obliteration, I'm not sure if it's the same, but you need to curse in order to let them explode. So it's not really necessary if this hex, what is this curse, or is it a good curse or a bad curse? It's just like, hey, I need a curse on that, right? And 1 curse is free, so you always want to aim for 1, but it's not like, it's not like an incredible powerful where it's like, oh, if I add a curse, you know, we have like 10 times our damage. It never was the thing, but still everybody wants to have one, right? So hex scale, gem scaling. This is going to be interesting because I like Hex Blast. Different hex types are not evenly balanced when applied via hex on hit modifiers. Some hexes like Vulnerability or Despair are much more powerful than others. This is because hex on hit modifiers apply a hex equivalent to the level 1 version of the hex skill gem. Some hexes are very strong at level 1 relative to their level 20 power because they scale in a more gradual way than with the gem level. This means that in some cases using a hex on hit is too powerful alongside its benefit of also applying hexes automatically. However, stabilizing the gem scaling rates of hexes in general, they should be twice as powerful at gem level 20 than they are at gem level 1. Okay, that's fair enough. Scaling curse effect. We feel that there are currently too many sources of curse effect available. That is absolutely true. This has created a large power gap between players that have no investment curses and those that have heavily investment into curses, which has continually caused us to have the baseline effect of curses to be lower than we'd like. We are regulating number of sources of curse effect throughout the game. This will also rein the power of players building curse support characters. These changes have been focused on less accessible sources of curse effect, such as Eldritch Implicit on helmets, rather than accessible sources like the passive skill tree. The curse effect notables on cluster jewels have been replaced with other appropriate ones. For example, the one that used to grant flammability effect now allows your flammability to apply to hex-proof enemies and also cause your ignites and cursed enemies to deal damage faster. This is big. I like this. I like damage faster. So basically, what I want to say is, you guys know that I like lock, okay? It's a mix between love and like, okay? I lock my SS Drake characters, right? But I found out the more Chaos Dot I play, the best versions are usually the ones that just have an incredible powerful, Despair curse. You know, it's not about like, obviously it is about like skill level and sources of spell damage and dot multi and chaos damage and those kind of things. But the strongest out of all the builds do actually have hundreds curse effectiveness on your despair to get your biggest damage output, which I think just replicates what it says here, that there is just too many sources, and if you start stacking something to ridiculous amounts, you're gonna have like so much more power output than you would have on a normal way of building the character. So makes sense. I welcome this change. The Occultist Ascendancy class. Oh no. We have removed the 15% increased effect of your curses, and enemies you curse have malediction stats from the malediction notable in the Occultist Ascendancy. Wait, what does it do then, besides like one additional curse? Your hexes can affect hexproof enemies has been moved from a Profane Bloom to the Malediction notable. We will be renaming this notable passives as it no longer causes you to apply Malediction enemy to your curse. I don't like that. Simply because I just explained cursed enemies explode, right? And also says your hexes can affect hexproof enemies. So you will always trigger your explosions. So if you don't have this line, then you actually have to pay attention to your map modifiers when monsters are hexproof, for example, because you're not going to trigger explosions. I think this was like a 2-in-1 gain that you got with Profane Bloom. Now swapping that up almost needs you to take both nodes instead of only one, and then take like stun immunity from Vile Bastion, for example, or power charge stacking. I'm not sure about that. Because then Malediction is what? One additional curse and hexproof enemies. Who is taking Profane Bloom then? We have more sources of explosion in the game. And it's an Ascendancy point. Because Profane Bloom is just going to be explode. Or curse. Ah, man. I'm not sure about that. Due to the significant increase in the power of hexes against tougher monsters, the effects of this notable are still very strong, as the removal of the hex penalty cannot be understated. The massive buff to hexes especially applies to occultists because they have access to more hexes than other ascendancies. The curse effect removed from the notable previously known as Malediction has been moved to the passive skill tree, where it's available for everyone. Okay. This is important because while the occultist is still the strongest overall ascendancy for someone who wants to specialize in applying many hexes, it's not mandatory to play for someone who merely wants to apply really strong hexes. Wait, are they gonna remove what is it, Doomsday, and get Malediction as Keystone? With one additional curse, and curses can apply to hexproof enemies? I mean, that's just gonna make my build even stronger. I mean, I like that. Oh, wait, and then I need to reposition my my Legion Jewel, maybe. But it's just like, I would assume, because they said they want to change something with the Doomsday, because they remove Hex, and now they say they want to add this as a Keystone, right? Interesting. I mean, getting an additional curse was only here on the Whispers of Doom. If you're not a witch, a shadow, or a ranger, maybe, you don't really have access to that, because, you know, if you're a marauder, like, how often is it gonna happen that you're gonna scale up to Whispers of Doom? So the only way of doing it is getting it by an anointment. So that would mean that the keystone has to be somewhere in the middle, so it's accessible for all character classes. So maybe it's gonna be somewhere of, like, these keystones over here, right? Because otherwise it just wouldn't make sense to me. Because if it, let's assume they would make a Doomsday, then it's only accessible for the top side of the tree, and every Slayer or Ranger that will not have access to it, which they want to not have, right? They want to have this to, like, that everybody can use it if they want to. Temporal Chains and Enfeeble. The current balance of Enfeeble and Temporal Chains makes them exceedingly strong against normal and magic monsters, while being relatively ineffective against Pinnacle boss. For example, at level 20, Temporal Chains currently reduces the Pinnacle boss action speed by just 4%. Wow! You can get more than twice as much action speed reduction using a skill that chills. This is another case of hexes being weakest where they matter most and strongest where they matter least. That is absolutely true. Because of the change to the curse effect, we're now able to make Temporal Chains and evil strong defensive options without requiring large investments into curse effect. In addition to changes to their overall gem levels scaling, we are also planning to increase the cursed, rare, or unique enemies have less action speed modifier in Temporal Chains, as well as increasing the cursed, rare, or unique enemies deal less damage modifier in Enfeeble. So here's the thing. I know that bosses, pinnacle bosses, endgame bosses, whatever bosses you want to name, you know, they should be stronger. Obviously, it's a freaking boss. But instead of, like, giving them X, Y, C defensive layers, just, like, double, triple, quadruple their HP, so people are not really affected by that too much. They still, like, you know, I need in both versions, I need, like, 2 minutes to kill a boss based on the build. But one basically kills out other builds, and some are just not even affected if they don't run curses, right? And if you are like curse stacking, then you're gonna be a lot weaker against those bosses. But why, you know? It's like having, like, let's say you play a pure physical build, and all of a sudden you fight against a monster that has like 10,000 or 10,000, yeah, like let's say 150,000 armor. You know how low your damage is gonna be, and every elemental based build will be like, yo, this boss is so easy, dude, I one-shot it. And every melee build is like, or physical build, because armor is like against all hits, right? And every physical build is like, dude, I don't want to fight this boss, it's like, it's so freaking tanky. And this is like the same with like curse builds and all these kind of things. You wonder, like, if you would just remove all defenses of the bosses and just give them like a shit ton of more life, and life is extra energy shield, which is also not really fair because chaos kills ignore energy shield. You guys know what I mean, right? You want to bring a balance so all the builds fight the same difficulty of boss, and not like some bosses are like way more resistance to your build, and if you would reroll, you could make this or kill this boss a lot easier. I don't know. Vulnerability in Despair. While working on the updates outlined above, we took the opportunity to make some stat changes to Vulnerability and Despair to help make these gems cleaner. They are now more focused on making enemies vulnerable to physical and chaos damage in ways that are generically useful for any build dealing primarily physical or chaos damage. We will confirm the specifics in the changes in the 320 expansion patch notes. Makes sense. Hexblast. Hexblast has had its skill mechanics and damage adjusted to account for the loss of Doom's scaling. Broadly speaking, it does less damage at the very top end of gameplay, but getting into a fairly decent level of damage is easier than before. It now removes a random hex from an enemy and will deal more damage with hits and ailments if a hex was removed in this way. Its damage is also more consistent because you no longer need to wait for Doom to build up. This is like very, very good, and I can see Hexblast Ignite being a very, very strong league starter just because of that. Conclusion: in general, hexes will be stronger against tough monsters and weaker against lesser monsters. We've removed Doom in order to simplify how hexes work, introduce penalties to automated hex applications methods to keep them from outscaling self-casting, and made several other balance changes as a consequence of these overall changes. Please note that the above plans are still subject to change in the lead up to the launch of the Forbidden Sanctum expansion. We'll reveal the specifics of these changes in the patch notes. Yeah, overall, I really enjoy or like reading this. I think this is going to be good at the game. I don't think that everything needs to be, you know, needs to have like a Harvard degree to understand how something is working. I think that GGG sometimes with their goal to make something very complex and in-depth, they just make things way more complicated and a lot worse than it would be if you just keep it simple and good, you know? And I think that's exactly what they want to reach here. It's very interesting with Hexblast because I personally think that Hexblast is gonna be really fucking good. Yeah, I mean, if it deals, it was already pretty good as a league starter, and now with like getting damage for lower levels, I mean, we don't know how it's gonna be at like end game levels against pinnacle bosses, like, but this is not a league starter, right? But I guess like just because of this, I would assume that Hexblast Ignite would be a very, very decent, strong league starter if somebody is into that. But yeah, let me know in the comments what you guys think about these changes. I think they're good. I think it's definitely valid what you're writing, that if you're willing to press an additional button, that you're gonna get more out of it instead of just pressing one button like I do and just don't care about because I have so much damage. So and otherwise we're gonna get to a point where we're gonna get so much damage that it doesn't matter, right? But overall, like, why not? I like the changes. Let me know in the comments, and thanks for tuning in, thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.